The abandoned mining station on Kepler 7 was exactly the kind of place where careers ended and bodies disappeared, which made it perfect for what Commander Kai Renton had in mind. After 8 months of chasing Lisa Kai through 12 star systems, dodging her traps, and trying not to get killed by the various creative methods she'd employed to discourage pursuit, he'd finally cornered the most dangerous assassin in the Outer Rim territories. Engine troubles? Kai asked as he approached her disabled ship, his plasma rifle trained on the cargo bay where his scanners indicated she was waiting. That's got to be embarrassing for someone of your reputation. Hyperdrive motivator failure, came the reply, her voice carrying the lilting accent that marked her as Valoran despite her apparent lack of concern about being trapped on a station with no functional escape route. Quite inconvenient timing, really. Kai moved through the ship with practiced caution, noting the way every surface seemed to gleam with the kind of cleanliness that suggested either obsessive maintenance habits or someone who was very good at removing forensic evidence. Probably both, given what he knew about Lisa Kai's professional standards. You know, he said, keeping his rifle ready as he cleared each compartment, most people in your situation would be planning some kind of last-ditch escape attempt. Hidden weapons, explosive traps, that sort of thing. Most people aren't me. No, they're not. Most people haven't killed 17 government officials, 2 corporate executives, and a hegemony trade minister. Most people don't have a bounty on their head that's worth more than some planet's annual GDP. Kai found her in the ship's common area, sitting at a table that was set with what appeared to be tea service for 2, as if she'd been expecting him to join her for a social visit. Her pointed ears and silver-flecked skin marked her as unmistakably Valoran, but there was something about her composure that went beyond species characteristics into the realm of someone who was absolutely comfortable with danger. Commander Renton, she said pleasantly, gesturing to the empty chair across from her. You're earlier than I expected. I haven't finished preparing. Preparing for what? For our conversation, of course. Lisa Kai poured tea into both cups with movements that were graceful enough to be hypnotic and precise enough to be lethal. Surely you didn't think I'd allow myself to be captured without at least attempting to understand a man who's been hunting me with such admirable persistence. Kai kept his rifle trained on her while mentally cataloging every object in the room that could conceivably be used as a weapon. Given Lisa Kai's reputation, that included pretty much everything from the tea service to the decorative wall panels. I'm not here for conversation. I'm here to collect the bounty on your head. Yes, I assumed as much. 23 million credits, isn't it? Quite generous for someone who's technically never been convicted of any crimes in a proper court of law. Technicalities don't matter much when you're dead. Lisa Kai smiled, an expression that was simultaneously beautiful and deeply unsettling. Commander Renton, do you know why I allowed you to find me? Because your ship broke down and you ran out of places to run. Because in 8 months of pursuit, you've demonstrated qualities that I find intriguing. Tactical flexibility, strategic thinking, and most importantly, a moral code that prevents you from simply bombing civilian areas where I might be hiding. She sipped her tea with the kind of calm that suggested she was discussing weather patterns rather than her impending death. You're not like the other bounty hunters who've tried to collect on my contracts. Kai felt a familiar chill, the one that always preceded situations where his prey turned out to be more dangerous than his intelligence had suggested. What happened to the other bounty hunters? Oh, they're dead. All of them. But their approaches lacked sophistication. Crude methods, poor planning, inadequate research into their targets' capabilities. And you think I'm different? I think you're the first hunter who's managed to track me across multiple star systems without once resorting to indiscriminate violence or civilian casualties. That suggests a level of professional competence that I respect. Kai studied her face, looking for signs of deception or distraction techniques, but finding only genuine interest mixed with something that might have been approval. Respect doesn't make you less dead. No, but it does make the process more interesting. Lisa Kai set down her teacup and folded her hands in her lap, her posture somehow managing to be both relaxed and ready for immediate action. Commander Renton, may I ask you a question before you attempt to kill me? You can ask. I might not answer. Why did you become a bounty hunter? Your military record suggests someone who values honor, duty, and protection of civilians. Hunting people for money seems inconsistent with those values. Kai felt his jaw tighten, memories he'd been trying to avoid surfacing despite his efforts to stay focused on the present situation. My military career ended badly. Bounty hunting pays well and doesn't require me to trust anyone except myself. Ended badly how? That's not relevant to this situation. I think it's entirely relevant. You're pointing a weapon at someone whose death will make you rich, but you're hesitating because some part of you isn't entirely comfortable with what you're about to do. Kai's finger tightened on the rifle's trigger, but he found himself unable to complete the motion. There was something about Lisa Kai's calm observation that made him want to prove her wrong, to demonstrate that he was perfectly capable of killing her without moral complications. I'm not hesitating. Of course you are. If you weren't hesitating, I'd already be dead. Lisa Kai leaned forward slightly, her silver-flecked skin catching the ambient light in patterns that seemed almost hypnotic. Commander, may I make a suggestion? What? If you're going to kill me, you should at least do it properly. The way you're holding that rifle suggests you're planning to shoot me in the chest, which is messy, potentially non-fatal, and will leave forensic evidence that could complicate your collection of the bounty. Kai stared at her, his brain struggling to process what he was hearing. Are you giving me advice on how to murder you more efficiently? I'm suggesting that if you insist on proceeding with this course of action, you might as well do it with some degree of professional competence. Lisa Kai stood up slowly, her movements fluid and unthreatening. However, if you're genuinely interested in efficiency, you should abandon the rifle entirely. Why? Because energy weapons leave distinctive burn patterns that forensic investigators can trace to specific manufacturers and serial numbers. Much better to use something that won't create a ballistic signature. She moved to a cabinet mounted on the far wall, opening it to reveal an array of bladed weapons that looked both beautiful and extremely functional. Much more practical for close-range work. Kai watched in fascination as she selected a knife with a crystalline blade that seemed to bend light around its edges, offering it to him handle first with the same casual courtesy she'd shown while serving tea. You're handing me a weapon. I'm handing you the proper tool for the job you came here to do. Lisa Kai returned to her seat, settling back into her chair with the same relaxed composure she'd maintained throughout their conversation. Though I should warn you that Valoran ceremonial blades require specific handling techniques to be used effectively. Kai accepted the weapon, immediately noting its perfect balance and the way its grip seemed to conform to his hand as if it had been custom-made for him. This is insane. This is practical. If you're going to kill me, Commander Renton, I'd prefer that you do it with some degree of style and competence. Kai raised the blade, testing its weight and trying to ignore the surreal nature of a situation where his target was actively helping him select murder weapons. Any last words? Lisa Kai smiled, the same expression that had been unsettling him since he'd found her calmly drinking tea in her disabled ship. Yes. You're holding it wrong. Kai looked down at the knife in his hand, then back at her face, seeing something in her eyes that suggested he'd just walked into a trap that had nothing to do with hidden weapons or explosive devices. What do you mean? I mean that grip will give you very little control over the blade's trajectory, your thumb placement is entirely wrong for precision work, and the angle you're holding it at will make it almost impossible to achieve the kind of clean kill that won't complicate your bounty collection. Lisa Kai leaned back in her chair, her expression shifting from amusement to what looked almost like disappointment. Commander Renton, for someone with your reputation, your knowledge of close-quarters combat is remarkably limited. Kai felt heat rise in his cheeks, a reaction that was equal parts embarrassment and irritation. I know how to use a knife. You know how to wave a knife around in a way that might intimidate civilians or discourage bar fights. You do not know how to use a knife to kill someone efficiently and cleanly. Lisa Kai gestured at his grip with the kind of clinical interest that a teacher might show while correcting a student's homework. May I demonstrate the proper technique? You want to show me how to hold the weapon I'm about to kill you with? I want to show you how to hold that weapon properly, regardless of what you intend to do with it afterward. Professional pride, you understand. Kai stared at her for a long moment, trying to decide whether he was dealing with someone who was completely insane, utterly fearless, or playing some kind of psychological game that he didn't understand. Possibly all three. This is the strangest assassination I've ever attempted. I should hope so, Lisa Kai replied, her smile returning with renewed brightness. After all, if you're going to kill the most dangerous assassin in the Outer Rim territories, it should at least be memorable. And despite everything. The bounty, the months of pursuit, the plasma rifle he'd set aside in favor of a blade he apparently didn't know how to use properly, Kai found himself genuinely curious about what she was going to teach him. The first mistake most people make with bladed weapons, Lisa Kai said, rising from her chair with the fluid grace of someone completely comfortable in her own skin, is assuming that holding a knife is intuitive. It's not. It's a learned skill that requires understanding of anatomy, physics, and the specific properties of your chosen blade. Kai watched her approach, his grip tightening on the weapon despite her casual manner. I know which end is sharp. Yes, but do you know the 17 different ways to hold the grip depending on your intended target area? Do you understand how blade weight distribution affects striking angles? Can you compensate for the way crystalline edges behave differently from metal ones under stress? She stopped just outside what would normally be considered attack range, close enough that Kai could see the intricate silver patterns that traced across her luminescent skin like living artwork, but far enough that he didn't feel immediately threatened by her proximity. Show me your current grip, she said, her tone shifting to something that sounded remarkably like professional instruction. My current grip is fine. Your current grip is adequate for opening packages or spreading preserves. It's entirely unsuitable for precision work. Lisa Kai gestured at his hand position. You're holding it like a tool rather than a weapon. Thumb placement is wrong, finger distribution is inefficient, and your wrist angle will give you no control over blade trajectory once you initiate a strike. Despite himself, Kai found his attention focusing on her critique. After 15 years of military and bounty hunting experience, he'd never had anyone analyze his combat techniques with this level of clinical detail. So how should I be holding it? That depends on what you're trying to accomplish. Are you attempting a quick execution, a precise surgical strike, or a defensive combat engagement? Lisa Kai tilted her head, studying his grip with the kind of professional interest that seemed to completely ignore the fact that they were discussing the best way for him to kill her. Each application requires different hand positioning. Let's go with quick execution, since that's what I came here for. Excellent choice. Most efficient for your purposes and least likely to create complications. Lisa Kai moved closer, close enough that Kai could smell something like starlight and ozone that seemed to be her natural scent. May I adjust your grip? It's much easier to demonstrate than to describe. Kai stared at her, his mind struggling to process the surreal nature of what she was suggesting. You want to physically help me hold the weapon I'm planning to use on you? I want to ensure that if you insist on proceeding with this course of action, you do so with adequate technique. Her expression carried the kind of patient professionalism that suggested this was a perfectly normal educational opportunity. Commander Renton, poor blade work is an insult to the craft. If you're going to kill me, I prefer that you do it properly. This is insane. This is practical education. Now, may I adjust your grip, or would you prefer to continue holding that blade like you're planning to carve a roast? Against every instinct developed over years of combat experience, Kai found himself nodding. Lisa Kai stepped closer, her hands moving to cover his with the kind of gentle precision that spoke of complete confidence in her own safety. First adjustment, thumb placement. You want pressure here, not here. Her fingers guided his into a new position that immediately felt more natural and secure. Notice how that changes your control over the blade's angle. Kai flexed his grip experimentally, surprised by how much more stable the weapon felt. It's more balanced. Exactly. Second adjustment, finger distribution. You're gripping too tightly with your ring finger and not tightly enough with your middle finger. She made tiny corrections to his hand position, her touch cool and sure against his skin. Proper grip allows for both strength and flexibility. And the wrist angle? Needs to rotate approximately 15 degrees clockwise. Like this. Kai adjusted his wrist position, and suddenly the blade seemed to align naturally with his arm rather than fighting against it. Better? Kai tested the new grip, noting how much more control he had over the weapon's movement. This actually feels professional. Because it is professional. You've been holding bladed weapons like an amateur for your entire career. Kai stepped back slightly, though she remained well within what should have been dangerous striking distance. Now, strike positioning. Where exactly are you planning to target? I hadn't really thought about specifics. Of course you hadn't. Most people assume that anywhere in the torso will be adequately fatal, which is both inefficient and potentially cruel. Kai turned to face him directly, her posture relaxed and open. If you're attempting a quick execution, you want to target the cardiac plexus, here. She placed her hand on her own chest, indicating a specific point just below her sternum. Single strike, upward angle, penetration depth of approximately 4 inches. Death within 30 seconds, minimal blood loss, clean forensic profile. Kai stared at the spot she was indicating, then back at her face. You're giving me precise instructions on how to kill you. I'm giving you precise instructions on how to kill anyone efficiently. The fact that I happen to be your current target is somewhat beside the point. How is that beside the point? Because education transcends immediate circumstances. Even if you decide not to kill me today, this knowledge will be useful in future situations. Kai moved to demonstrate proper striking stance, her movements flowing like water but precise as mathematics. Proper foot positioning, weight distribution, follow-through techniques, all essential components of effective blade work. Despite the absolute surreal nature of the situation, Kai found himself genuinely fascinated by her instruction. No military trainer had ever provided this level of detailed analysis of close-quarters combat techniques. You really are an expert at this. I'm an expert at violence in all its forms, Commander Renton. Bladed weapons, projectile weapons, explosives, poisons, environmental hazards, psychological manipulation, it's my profession. Kai returned to her original position, settling back into her chair with the same calm composure she'd maintained throughout their conversation. What I find interesting is that you've managed to build a successful bounty hunting career with such limited knowledge of fundamental combat skills. I've never had complaints about my effectiveness. Because most of your targets have been even less skilled than you are. Standard criminals, desperate fugitives, people whose primary qualifications involve poor decision-making rather than combat expertise. She picked up her teacup, sipping with the kind of casual elegance that made the entire situation feel like a social visit rather than a confrontation. I'm curious, have you ever attempted to apprehend someone with actual professional training in lethal arts? Kai considered the question, running through his mental catalogue of previous bounties. Not really. Most bounty hunters avoid targets with serious combat skills. Sensible policy. Much safer to hunt people who can't effectively fight back. Kai's tone carried no judgment, just clinical observation. Which raises the question of why you chose to pursue me. The bounty was too good to pass up. 23 million credits is certainly attractive. But you must have known that someone commanding that level of bounty would possess corresponding levels of dangerous capability. Kai was quiet for a moment, trying to articulate motivations that he wasn't entirely sure he understood himself. I suppose I wanted to know if I was good enough. Good enough for what? Good enough to catch someone who'd never been caught. Good enough to succeed where everyone else had failed. He looked down at the knife in his hand, noting how natural the corrected grip felt after just a few minutes of proper instruction. Good enough to prove that my military training wasn't completely wasted when my career ended. Ah. Kai set down her teacup, her expression shifting to something that might have been understanding. This isn't really about the bounty at all, is it? Of course it's about the bounty. Commander Renton, in my experience, people who hunt targets far beyond their skill level are usually trying to prove something to themselves rather than simply collecting payment. Her silver-flecked skin seemed to shimmer as she leaned forward slightly. What are you trying to prove? Kai felt heat rise in his cheeks, a reaction that was equal parts embarrassment and irritation at her perceptiveness. That's not relevant to this situation. I think it's entirely relevant. You've spent 8 months pursuing me with dedication that goes far beyond professional obligation. You've turned down other, easier contracts to focus exclusively on my capture. And now that you've finally cornered me, you're hesitating to complete the task you came here to accomplish. I'm not hesitating. I'm listening to your weapons lecture. You're stalling because some part of you recognizes that killing me won't actually solve whatever problem you're trying to address through this hunt. Kai raised the blade, testing the grip she'd taught him and trying to ignore the uncomfortable accuracy of her psychological assessment. You don't know anything about my problems. I know that you left the Terran Defense Force under circumstances that still cause you emotional distress when mentioned. I know that you've been hunting bounties for 3 years without forming any personal relationships or maintaining a permanent residence. And I know that you chose to pursue the most dangerous target available rather than building a sustainable career with manageable risks. How do you know all that? Because I've been studying you for 8 months, Commander. Learning your patterns, understanding your motivations, developing a comprehensive profile of your capabilities and psychological state. Lisa Kai's smile returned, carrying the same unsettling combination of warmth and danger. Did you really think I'd allow someone to hunt me without conducting thorough reconnaissance on their background and methods? Kai stared at her, pieces of an uncomfortable puzzle clicking into place in his mind. You've been investigating me. I've been evaluating you. There's a difference. Evaluating me for what? For suitability. Suitability for what? Lisa Kai was quiet for a long moment, her expression cycling through what looked like internal debate. When she spoke, her voice carried a seriousness that hadn't been there before. Commander Renton, what do you know about the organization that placed the bounty on my head? I know they have 23 million credits and they want you dead. Do you know why they want me dead? Kai considered the question, realizing that he'd never actually investigated the motivations behind the contract. I assumed it was related to your assassination work. Maybe you killed someone they cared about. I killed someone they were afraid of. Someone who had discovered information about their operations that could have exposed them to galactic authorities. Lisa Kai's luminescent skin shifted to deeper silver tones. The same organization that destroyed your military career when you got too close to uncovering their infiltration of Terran Defense Force command structure. The knife slipped in Kai's suddenly nerveless grip, the perfect technique she taught him forgotten in the face of what she just said. What did you just say? I said that we have a common enemy, Commander Renton. And I think it's time we discussed what we're going to do about that. Kai sank into the chair across from Lisa Kai, the knife forgotten in his hand as memories he'd been trying to suppress for 3 years came flooding back with uncomfortable clarity. How do you know about my military service? Because the same shadow organization that wants me dead orchestrated your discharge from the Terran Defense Force. Lisa Kai refilled his teacup with movements that were somehow both casual and precise. Operation Silent Thunder. You were investigating discrepancies in supply chain manifests that would have revealed their infiltration of TDF logistics networks. That operation is classified at the highest levels. Yes, and your commanding officer decided that your investigation posed a threat to operational security. Except your commanding officer was being paid by the same people who are now paying you to kill me. Lisa Kai pushed the teacup toward him, her expression serious in a way it hadn't been since he'd found her. Convenient how your career ended just before you could expose their activities, wasn't it? Kai stared at the tea, his mind racing through implications he'd never allowed himself to consider. Colonel Harrison said my investigation was based on flawed data analysis. Colonel Harrison received a substantial financial incentive to terminate your investigation and remove you from active duty. Lisa Kai activated a small holographic projector, filling the space between them with financial records that showed payment transfers in amounts that made Kai's stomach clench. The same incentive structure they use for all their asset management. Asset management? People who do their work without realizing who they're really working for. Bounty hunters, mercenaries, corporate security specialists, anyone whose skills can be directed toward their objectives through careful manipulation of available information. Kai looked at the financial records, seeing patterns of payment that lined up precisely with dates he remembered from his own military service. You're saying I've been working for them without knowing it. I'm saying you've been working for them because they've been very careful to ensure you never had enough information to realize who was actually signing your paychecks. Lisa Kai manipulated the display, showing additional records that tracked Kai's bounty hunting career. Every contract you've accepted over the past 3 years has eliminated someone who posed a threat to their operations. That's impossible. I've been hunting standard criminals, thieves, smugglers, tax evaders. Tax evaders who had discovered discrepancies in corporate accounting that would have revealed money laundering operations. Smugglers who had stumbled across shipping routes used for trafficking operations. Thieves who had stolen data containing sensitive information about political corruption networks. Kai studied the records, seeing his own career laid out in ways that revealed patterns he'd never noticed. Every target, every contract, every successful capture, all serving the interests of an organization he'd never known existed. This is what you meant about suitability, he said finally. You've been evaluating me as a potential asset. I've been evaluating you as a potential ally, Lisa Kai corrected. Someone with the skills and motivation to help me dismantle the network that destroyed both our careers. Both our careers? Commander Renton, do you really think I chose assassination as my preferred profession? I was a Valoran intelligence operative specializing in counter-espionage until this shadow organization arranged for my entire unit to be eliminated during what we were told was a routine extraction mission. Her luminescent skin shifted to darker tones that spoke of old pain mixed with controlled anger. I survived. My team didn't. And I discovered that our mission had been compromised by the same people who are now paying you to kill me. Kai set down the teacup, his hand not entirely steady. So you became an assassin to hunt them down. I became an assassin because it was the most efficient way to access the kind of people who might have information about the organization that murdered my colleagues. Every target I've eliminated over the past 5 years has been connected to their network in some way. The 17 government officials, the corporate executives, the trade minister, they were all working for this shadow organization. They were all complicit in operations that resulted in the deaths of innocent people. My people. Lisa Kai's expression hardened. What I didn't realize until recently was that they've been using my assassination work to eliminate their own compromised assets while simultaneously building a case for having me terminated. Kai felt pieces of an impossible puzzle clicking into place in his mind. They hired me to kill you because you've become too dangerous to their operations. They hired you to kill me because I finally identified their command structure and was planning to expose them to galactic law enforcement. Your successful completion of this contract would have eliminated their primary threat while providing them with a skilled operative who believes he's simply conducting legitimate bounty hunting work. And if I had killed you, they would have offered you more contracts, each one eliminating additional threats to their organization, until you either became too dangerous to control or discovered the truth about who you were really working for. Lisa Kai leaned back in her chair, her expression carrying the kind of tired resignation that came from understanding unpleasant truths. At which point, they would have arranged for your elimination by the next skilled operative in their recruitment pipeline. Kai was quiet for several minutes, trying to process the magnitude of what she was describing. This entire situation is a setup. This entire situation is a recruitment opportunity disguised as a standard assassination contract. They've been manipulating both of us toward this confrontation to determine whether you're suitable for more advanced operations. And if I'm not suitable, then I kill you in self-defense. They write off your contract fee as a business expense, and they recruit someone else to eliminate me. Lisa Kai's tone was matter-of-fact, but Kai caught the underlying tension that suggested she wasn't as calm about this possibility as her voice implied. Simple and efficient. But if I am suitable? Then we have an opportunity to turn their own recruitment process against them. They expect either your success or your death. They don't expect partnership. Kai looked around the ship's common area, seeing it with new understanding. The perfectly maintained surfaces, the strategic positioning of furniture, the tea service that had been prepared for 2 people, none of it was coincidental. You planned this entire conversation. I planned for multiple contingencies based on different possible outcomes of our confrontation. This particular conversation was the one I hoped would be possible. Because you wanted my help. Because I recognized qualities in you that suggested you might be willing to choose justice over profit once you understood what was really at stake. Lisa Kai met his eyes directly. Commander Renton, you've spent 3 years hunting people for money because you believed it was legitimate work. How do you feel about discovering that you've been manipulated into eliminating innocent people? Kai felt something cold and sharp settle in his chest, a combination of rage and disgust that was directed as much at himself as at the organization that had used him. I feel like I've been played for a fool. You feel like someone with integrity who was deliberately given false information by people who specialize in exploiting that integrity for their own purposes. Lisa Kai's voice carried a gentleness that was at odds with her reputation as one of the galaxy's most dangerous killers. There's a difference. Is there? I should have investigated more thoroughly. I should have asked better questions about my contracts. You should have, yes. But they were very careful to provide you with information that supported the conclusions they wanted you to reach. Professional manipulation at the highest levels. Kai set the knife on the table between them, no longer interested in holding a weapon while processing information that was rewriting everything he thought he knew about his recent life. What are you proposing? I'm proposing that we use their expectation of my death to our advantage. You report successful completion of your contract, collect your payment, and accept whatever additional assignments they offer. Except this time, you'll have accurate information about your targets and their real relationship to the organization's operations. And you? I disappear. Officially dead, unofficially gathering intelligence on their command structure and preparing to dismantle their networks from the inside. Lisa Kai's expression grew more serious. It's dangerous work, Commander. They have resources and connections across multiple star systems. If they discover our deception, they'll eliminate both of us without hesitation. But if we succeed? If we succeed, we expose an organization that has corrupted government, military, and corporate structures across the galaxy. We bring justice to people who have been operating above the law for decades. And we prevent them from destroying any more lives like they destroyed ours. Kai was quiet for a long moment, weighing the magnitude of what she was proposing against the alternatives available to him. He could complete his original mission, collect his bounty, and continue his career without ever learning the truth about his manipulation. Or he could accept that his life had been built on lies and try to do something about the people responsible for those lies. This is insane, he said finally. Yes. And dangerous. Extraordinarily so. And likely to result in both of us being hunted by an organization with resources that apparently span multiple governments and military structures. That is a distinct possibility. Kai looked at Lisa Kai, seeing someone who was offering to risk everything to fight back against people who had treated both their lives as disposable assets. All right, he said. How do we fake your death convincingly enough to fool people who specialize in not being fooled? Lisa Kai smiled, the same expression that had been unsettling him since he'd found her calmly drinking tea while waiting to be killed. Commander Renton, you're about to discover that my expertise in assassination extends to areas you haven't even considered yet. The plan Lisa Kai outlined was elegant in its simplicity and terrifying in its precision. Within 6 hours, she would be officially dead, Kai would be 23 million credits richer, and they would both be committed to a course of action that would either expose a galactic conspiracy or get them both killed by people who had elevated murder to an art form. The key to a convincing assassination, Lisa Kai explained as she prepared various compounds that Kai sincerely hoped weren't as toxic as they looked, is understanding that most people have never actually witnessed a real death. Their expectations are based on entertainment media rather than biological reality. So we're counting on my employers not being forensic experts. We're counting on your employers being bureaucrats who rely on other people to handle the messy details of violence. She mixed two substances that immediately began producing a chemical reaction Kai found deeply unsettling. They'll want confirmation that I'm dead, but they won't want to examine the body personally. Kai watched her work, marveling at the way she approached what was essentially performance art with the same methodical precision she'd applied to weapons instruction. What exactly is that stuff going to do? Temporarily suppress my vital signs to levels that standard medical scanners will interpret as death, while maintaining minimal brain function to prevent actual tissue damage. Lisa Kai held up a small injector filled with liquid that shifted between colors in ways that hurt to look at directly. I'll be unconscious for approximately 18 hours, during which time you'll need to transport my apparently dead body to whatever location your employers require for confirmation. And then I wake up, we stage my escape from whatever morgue or disposal facility they've arranged, and you report that my body was stolen by unknown parties before proper disposal could be completed. Kai studied the injector, trying not to think about everything that could go wrong with a plan that involved temporarily killing someone to fake their death. What if the chemical doesn't work as expected? What if you don't wake up? Then you collect your bounty and continue your career with the knowledge that at least one person died trying to fight back against the organization that's been manipulating both our lives. Lisa Kai's tone was matter-of-fact, but Kai caught the underlying tension that suggested she was as nervous about this plan as he was. It's a risk worth taking. For you, maybe. You're the one who gets to be unconscious during the difficult part. Commander Renton, you're the one who has to maintain the deception while interacting with people who specialize in detecting lies and manipulation. I'd argue that your role is significantly more challenging than mine. Before Kai could respond, his communication array activated with the distinctive signal that indicated an incoming priority transmission. Both he and Lisa Kai froze, recognizing that timing this precise was unlikely to be coincidental. Commander Renton, said a voice that Kai recognized as his contact for high-value contracts, though he'd never learned the man's real name or seen his face, we understand you've successfully located your target. The situation is still developing, Kai replied carefully, gesturing for Lisa Kai to move out of the transmission's visual range. I've cornered her, but she's more dangerous than your intelligence suggested. We're sure you'll manage. However, circumstances have changed that require acceleration of your timeline. What kind of circumstances? The kind that mean your target must be eliminated within the next 4 hours, or the contract will be transferred to alternative operatives who are already en route to your location. Kai felt cold settle in his stomach as he realized that their situation had just become significantly more complicated. Alternative operatives. Backup resources to ensure contract completion. Standard protocol for high-value targets who might pose ongoing security risks. I don't need backup. I can handle this myself. We're sure you can, Commander. But company policy requires redundant coverage for contracts of this magnitude. Complete the termination within 4 hours, or step aside and allow our specialists to finish the work. The transmission ended with the kind of finality that suggested further discussion was not welcome. Kai turned to Lisa Kai, who had been listening from her concealed position with an expression that suggested she'd expected this development. Let me guess, she said, moving back into view now that the transmission was complete. They're sending additional operatives to ensure I don't survive this encounter. How did you know? Because acceleration tactics are standard procedure when they suspect their primary asset might be compromised. They've been monitoring your pursuit, and your hesitation to complete the kill has probably triggered automated protocols. So we have 4 hours instead of the 18 we planned for. We have 4 hours to implement a plan that was already risky under optimal conditions. Lisa Kai began moving with increased urgency, gathering equipment and supplies with the efficiency of someone who'd prepared for this possibility. The chemical cocktail I prepared requires a minimum of 6 hours to metabolize safely. Using it now could result in permanent neural damage or actual death. And our alternatives? We get creative about staging my death in ways that don't require chemical intervention. Kai watched her work, noting the way her movements had shifted from casual confidence to focused intensity. What are you thinking? I'm thinking that the most convincing death is one where the body disappears entirely. No corpse means no forensic analysis, but it also means no way for them to verify that death actually occurred. She paused in her preparations, her expression cycling through what looked like rapid tactical analysis. Unless we give them something else to focus on. Such as evidence of a catastrophic failure that would destroy both my body and the ship I've been trapped on. Kai gestured around the common area, her meaning immediately clear. Reactor overload. Spectacular explosion. Nothing left to examine. Except that this ship doesn't have a reactor capable of that kind of destructive yield. No, but the mining station we're docked to has fusion cores that could be destabilized to produce exactly the kind of explosion we need. Her smile returned, carrying the same unsettling combination of warmth and danger that had been unsettling him since their first meeting. All we need is someone with the technical knowledge to create a controlled overload that looks accidental. Kai stared at her, understanding beginning to dawn. Someone like a former military engineer with experience in demolitions and facility sabotage. Someone exactly like that. You've been planning this contingency since before I arrived. I've been planning multiple contingencies for various scenarios that might develop during our encounter. The beauty of having comprehensive knowledge about your target's background is that you can prepare for their likely responses to unexpected situations. Despite everything, the deception, the manipulation, the growing realization that nothing about this situation was what he'd originally believed, Kai found himself genuinely impressed by the scope of her preparation. How long do we have before the backup operatives arrive? Based on standard deployment protocols, approximately 3 hours. Enough time to rig the mining station's fusion cores and evacuate to a safe distance before the explosion. And after that? After that, we have the rest of our lives to hunt down the organization that's been treating us like disposable assets. Kai moved to a storage compartment, retrieving equipment that looked suspiciously like the kind of advanced surveillance gear that wasn't supposed to be available to private citizens. Assuming, of course, that you're still committed to this partnership. Kai looked around the ship that was about to become evidence of their fictional deaths, then at Kai, who was offering him the chance to fight back against people who had spent years manipulating his life without his knowledge. I'm committed, he said. But I have one condition. What? If we're going to be partners in this, I want you to teach me everything you know about assassination techniques. Real training, not just knife grip correction. Kai's expression brightened with what looked like genuine pleasure. Commander Renton, I was hoping you'd ask. You have excellent instincts and solid foundational skills. With proper instruction, you could become quite formidable. And you have the patience to train someone whose technique you've described as embarrassingly amateur. I have the professional pride to ensure that anyone working with me meets appropriate standards of competence. She began moving toward the ship's exit, gathering equipment for their sabotage mission. Besides, teaching you advanced combat skills will be considerably more enjoyable than killing you would have been. That's reassuring. Commander Renton, by the time I'm finished with your education, you'll be capable of infiltrating secure facilities, eliminating targets without leaving forensic evidence, and extracting information from people who specialize in not providing it. She paused at the airlock, her expression serious despite her earlier humor. Are you prepared for that level of transformation? Kai thought about the 3 years he'd spent unknowingly working for people who viewed him as a disposable asset, about the military career that had been destroyed to protect their operations, about all the innocent people he'd captured while believing he was hunting criminals. I'm prepared to become whatever I need to be to make them pay for what they've done. Good, Kai said, activating the airlock controls. Because once we stage our deaths and disappear from their records, there won't be any going back to who we were before. As they made their way through the mining station's maintenance corridors toward the fusion core control systems, Kai realized that he was no longer the same person who'd entered Lisa Kai's ship planning to collect a bounty. Somewhere between her weapons lecture and her revelation about their shared enemy, he'd become someone committed to justice rather than just profit. "Lisa Kai," he said as they reached the core control room, "when this is over, when we've exposed their operations and brought them to justice, what happens then?" She looked at him, her luminescent skin shifting to warmer tones that spoke of possibilities neither of them had dared to imagine. "Then we discover what kind of partnership we can build when we're not being manipulated by people who want us dead," she replied, beginning the delicate process of reprogramming fusion containment systems to fail catastrophically but predictably. "I suspect it will be considerably more interesting than either of our previous careers." 2 hours later, as they watched the mining station disappear in an explosion visible from 3 star systems away, Kai realized that Lisa Kai had been right about more than just knife techniques. Sometimes the most profound transformations begin when someone points out that you've been doing everything wrong, and offers to teach you a better way. Even if that someone was supposed to be your target, and the better way involved faking both your deaths to hunt down a galactic conspiracy. Especially then.